with several different rayas. One raya was because they had this bowl that held grapes, and Rav Tzadok told his son to tell Rabbi Yochanan that it was originally had a hole in it, and we plugged it up. While according to Beis Shammai, you wouldn't have needed to have. I'm sorry. According to Beis Shammai, according to Beis Hillel, it has to have a hole, right? And according to Beis Shammai, it didn't need to have a hole, but Vibalt that he spoke out. The Rashi speaks out. Even though he was a Talmud of Shammai, he feared like Beis Hillel. So that would be a raya that normally people fear like Beis Shammai, and he was the exception, and Rav Tzadok was the exception. He said like Beis Hillel. That was one of the rayas that the Gemara brought. That in fact they used to follow Beis Shammai's way. There was another raya was from the fact that they asked Rabbi Yeshua, when they asked Rabbi Yeshua what's the halacha with Torah Shabbos, he didn't want to get involved. He didn't want to get involved in answering that question. He only was willing to mention the issue with the kids, that the children of Hillel that come from a Yevama who married without any kind of chalitza, those children are 100% kosher, they're not pogum. But the fact that Rabbi Yeshua didn't want to get involved in the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel proved that Beis Shammai must still be paskening and acting according to their psak, that Yibum is done on Tzoros Ereva. So those were the rayas that we had. In fact, that Beis Shammai did follow their own psak. Okay, Gewalt. Shvach again. So Tashma, right away at the top of Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. And today's daf is, I guess, as close to a Gadita as we can expect in Yevamos. So today's not going to be a complicated day. It'll be a little bit of a cruise. Zok the Heilige Gemara. What's that? Tashma, in the days of Reb Doisa ben Harkinas. And we need to preface this. Rashi says that Reb Doisa ben Harkinas had a brother, and his brother's name, I believe, was Yonasan. The reason I say believe is because I didn't remember it from what I learned just yesterday, but it was Yonasan. So Reb Doisa ben Harkinas, Putra Tzoros Habas la'achim. Some dying paskin. Reb Doisa with the God Lador, and someone paskin that the Tzoros Habas may marry one of the brothers, which is exactly what Beis Shammai said. Shema Mina, you see from here, also they must have done it. Shema Mina. So this is another raya. We have a third raya, because in fact there was a time where they were actually matir Tzoros Habas. Means clearly there was a time where people acted like Beis Shammai. Gufa, let's delve down a little bit into this interesting story. We have Doisa ben Harkinas Tiru Tzoros Habas lach. They were very, very concerned. It was very difficult for them to accept this because Rabbi Doisa ben Harkinas was a very, very big Talmud Chacham, right? And the Einav Kamu Milavu Levesmerish, and since he was blind, since Rabbi Doisa was blind, he couldn't come to Besmerish, which means that they needed to confront Rabbi Doisa how he can allow such a psak to take hold, because we know we're supposed to pass on like Beis Hillel. So they said, Amru, the Talmidim in the Besmerish said, Mi Yelech. I'm looking at the little gears that I have at the side. Who amongst us is going to go to Rabbi Doisa? It's a little bit scary to tell him we have a problem. Who's going to tell him? So who volunteered? Amr Len Rabbi Yeshua, Ani Elech. I will go first. The Acharav, me, and who's going to come after me? Rabbi Loza ben Isaiah. The Achav, me, Rabbi Akiva. So I believe the Maharsha explains that the one was an Avezin, the one was a Nasi, and one was they had their different levels of prestige. So that's the way they decided to go. So V'achav mi Rabbi Akiva. Halchu v'amdu al Pesach Beisa. So they went and they stood by the door of his house. So you could see they were really they were scared to go in. Nichnesa shichfasoi, the shivcha who answered her, can I help you? No, I think they decided that's what he says. That's what the archbishop said. No, they were discussing. They were discussing who's going to go, and then when they started who's going to go, they all came together. That's how I understood it. So Nicholas Shivcha, his Shivcha running the house, the housekeeper where Rabbi went in and told him, because she wasn't just a cleaner, she was also the butler. She told Rabbi, Rabbi, Chachma Yisrael boin etzlacha. The Chachma Yisrael are coming to see you. So he said, Yichnasu, let them in. V'nichnasu, and they came in. Tav soili Rabbi Yeshua. So right away, Rabbi Yosy grabbed Rabbi Yeshua, and he put him on a golden couch. Why was Rabbi Yeshua the first? The Maharsha says because probably even though Rabbi Yosy couldn't see, he probably somewhat recognized Rabbi Yeshua, and that's why he took him in first. I'm sorry. Yeah, but we often walk into the room. Who is offered to be seated first? They offered to seat Rabbi Yeshua first. Well, how do you know that it's? How do you know? No, the Achav is when they were deciding who was going to go. They first he volunteered and he volunteered, but they all three went as a delegation together, I believe. So Amrlei, so Rabbi Yeshua told Rabbi Yosy, and Marla Talmidach Achar v'Yeshiv. Tell your next Talmud that he should sit down because there's somebody else here. Amrlei Mihu. So there, Rabbi Yosy had to ask who was it because Rabbi Yosy recognized Rabbi Yeshua, but the other Talmud didn't recognize. So he asked Rabbi Yeshua who is here. So he told him Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. To Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah who's here. Amar. So Rabbi Yosy says, really? V'yeshloi ben Lazariah chaverenu. My buddy Azariah has a child. In other words, he was from the older generation. I never knew. Kara Allah HaMikra. So the pasuk was appropriate for this scenario. Nar ha'yisi gam zakanti v'loy ra'isi tzadik netzah. V'zari mevak mishlachim.
Interesting. The Elazar ben Azariah was so much younger than the other ones. Because he was 18 when he became Yosy. He was so young compared to like.
So maybe that's why he didn't even know. He didn't even know that he had such a young child. Oh, you have Ben Zakunum. I didn't know Azariah had a Ben Zakunum.
I just find it so odd. Like he's a delegation. So we have an 80-year-old Reb Shlomo, then we have another, let's say, 75-year-old Reb Meirfeld, and then we have an 18-year-old Bocher from the Masifta.
I hear.
Why do you assume that Elazar ben Azariah is 18 at this point? This could be 20 years later, 30 years later.
Yeah, very possible. All I meant to say is that there's a huge gap in the ages. But I know that they were considering to make Rabbi Akiva Av Bezdin, and that was when he was 75, 80 years old, because he was 40 when he started learning, then 24 years of Talmidim, and at the same time, they rejected Rabbi Akiva because he didn't have yichus, and they brought in Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and the Mishnah said the 18. So I know that there's a huge gap. That's all I need to say.
Okay. So the project of Nar HaYisi Gam Zakanti V'Lo Yisi Tzadik Nezov V'Zari Mevak Shlochem. Like, what does this have to do with Azariah having a child? So the Pashup shot is the Rebbeinu Shalom gives everyone what they need. He gave him children, but I think Rabbi Elephant spoke from the Ben Yayad. I think that. What is he got a lot excited that Azariah had a child, and the pasuk that he quoted to say that this fits good in the pasuk is Nara Yisi Gam Zakanti Lo Yisi Tzadik Nezov V'Zari Mevak Shlochem. What does that have to do with the fact that Azariah had a child?
Maybe Azariah was very old, and he still didn't have a kid.
But where do you see anything in this pasuk about having a child?
How do you see Gam Zakanti?
V'Zari Mevak Shlochem, because there has to be Zarai. Because it would have to be Zari, otherwise how can you like love? Could be. But one of the problems that I heard was that about a child who follows in the way of his father. You have a father who's a Yushlam Chacham. You have a child who follows in the way who follows in the way of his father. That child is considered a Zaken because he's already building on what his father has. So Mamela, he's a Zaken even at a young age. So could be that's what he was saying. Azariah, who Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Elazar himself was a master of Talmid Chacham, is like living and adding to the life of his father. So by the time he was born, he was already a Zaken, or by the time he was already following his father's footsteps, he's a Zaken because he has already the years behind him from his father. Tafsu, so they took him. V'yishivu al mito shozov, and he sat down on this opulent bench. Amalei, and then once again, or could be Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, Amalei Rebbe, and more Talmidach Acher V'yeshin. We got somebody else here. Amalei Umihu, Akiva ben Yosy. Amalei, I heard so much about you. You're all over the internet. You're a sensation, and I never met you. Atahu Akiva ben Yosy, Sheshimcha Haylech, Misoy Boilim Batzayvay. You are the famous Akiva ben Yosy, who your name is all over the world. So Rabbi was like excited to meet the Gedolim of the newest generation. Shev b'ni, sit down, my son. Kamoisach yirbu b'Yisrael. So he didn't say this about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He didn't say this about Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Akiva, like you, there should be a lot of Rabbi Akivas out there.
It's Akiva from Gamzum Latoiva. Gamzum Latoiva is all over the world.
Gewaltig. Misoif Oilam, Vatsoif Oilam. That's right. Gewaltig. His chilu misabe b'moisad be'alachos. No, they didn't want to come right out and talk to him about Torah Erva. So they tried to make it as casual as possible. Not that we're coming to talk about this and attack, because they thought they were under the full impression that it was Rabbi who had paskin like Beis Shammai. So they were trying to slowly get into the subject as if it came up agavarcha. So they started shmuzing and learning until they got to the sugya of Tzaras Abbas. So they asked him, what is the God Lador, or what does the Boys say about Tzaras Abbas? Tzaras Abbas Mahu. Amalan Machloikes Beis Shammai uBeis Hillel. So then they pressed him a little further. Halacha K'divrei Mi. Rabbi Shua said, I'm not answering the question. But now Rabbi Shua came to Rav Doisa, and they asked him the same question that Rabbi Shua refused to answer for his Talmidim. He wanted Rav Doisa to answer for him. Okay, so this way he could say, I don't pass, Rav Doisa said. So halacha k'divrei mi, amar lahen halacha k'beis Hillel. I pass like Beis Hillel, meaning the Torah ha'erva could just marry anybody, and she may not do evil. Amar lei, so they told him, really? V'aloi mishimcha amru halacha k'beis Shammai. Well, they said in your name that halacha like Beis Shammai. So he said, so big deal. They say everything in Reb Chaim Kanievsky's name, even though half the things he never said. So what's the big deal? But that's not what he said. Amalam, he said, what did you hear when you heard the Psak Halacha, the Paskin like Beis Shammai? Did you hear them say that Doisa ben Hyrcanus said that Halacha like Beis Shammai? Oh, or maybe you heard that Ben Hyrcanus Shemat. Maybe you just heard quoted Ben Hyrcanus said the Halacha like Beis Shammai, and you assumed that it meant me. Amrulei Chaye Rebbe, we could say Ashvua Stam Shaman. We never heard your name Doisa. We heard Ben Hyrcanus. Amrlen, well, you should know. Ach Katan Yeshli. I have a young brother, Bechor Sotnu. Oy der Bucher a tough Bucher. He knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. And you know what his name is? V'Yonasan Shemoy. And his name is Yonasan. What? I thought it means he's like a Tamachah. I think Rashi says that he's Bechor Sotnu Charif. He's sharp. V'Oymid al Shmuasoi, and he knows his beans. And therefore, he'll paskin based on his knowledge. He's confident in his clarity of understanding of the subject. The Einoi Shav Mishmu Asoi Lasas Karabim. He's not in the spell from the Rabbim. He says, I don't care. When I have a suffix, I go Karabim. I don't have a suffix. I know what I'm talking about. I'm standing by my side. So he's a guy who doesn't back down. So Zok the Gemara, Yonis and Shemai, V'hu Talmidei Shammai, and he's from the Talmidim of Shammai. So he's passing like Beis Shammai. But if you want to confront him, v'hizaru, I suggest you become very careful with how you deal with him. Because he'll be able to wipe you out, because it's very hard to one up my brother who's a major chorev. He has 300 rayas that Tzaras Abbas is mutter, like Beis Shammai. So if you're going to want to confront him, just be careful, because he's definitely not an easy person to convince. If anything, he's going to convince you. Avo meirani. But Reb Doisa said, I could say Eidos, alei shemayim v'aretz, shal meducha zu, on this A meducha is a pestle. It's like a little keli that you crush it. So they used to turn them over sometimes. Meducha is like a part of a grinding system. I don't think so. So I think you would turn it upside down. It's like a bucket that you turn over and sit on, like a 5-gallon Home Depot pill. You flip it over, you can sit on it, right? So a meducha zu Yoshev Chagai Hanavi. Chagai Hanavi sat, and Chagai, if I'm not mistaken, was from the later Nevi'im, right? He wasn't from the early Nevi'im. He was from the later Nevi'im. V'amar, and he said, Shlosh Dvarim. And he said 3 things. The first thing he said was, Tzaras Abbas Asura. So the Navi already paskin that Tzaras Abbas Asura. And he also said 2 other things. Amoin Umoyav Ma'asrin Meiser Ani Bishvius. That Ammon and Moav take Meiser Ani Bishvius. In other words, that the lands of Ammon and Moav, the Gemara is going to elaborate soon, after they came back to the second Beis Hamikdash, they were not niskadish with the kedushas haaretz, and therefore there's no din shmita on them. We have this in Chagiga. There's no din shmita on them, and therefore you're allowed to plant in those lands. And normally they're not part of the Meiser cycle, the year of Shemitah, but they made it into a year of Meiser Ani. And the reason they did it this way is so that the poor people should have a way to have parnasa on the year of Shriyas. The more to tell us, side they were able to work those fields as employees, and side they were able to get the Meiser Ani. They got Matnas Aniyim from there. And the last psak was umekablim gerim min akar devayin umin atarmudim. You can accept gerim from these places, and you don't have to worry that there would be mamzerim involved. And the Gemara is going to elaborate on there. So there's a couple of interesting thoughts over here. Why was it necessary for Abdoisa to be talking about the other halachas and not just this halacha? So one of the Mefarshim say, I don't remember who, is that there's this concept of it. If someone's makel on 3 things, it makes him into a cow. And there's a certain tefillah on someone who's makel on too many things. So the reason why he quoted these 3 halachas is to show that I know for sure that Tzaras Abbas is a surah, because on the other 2 items he was makel. So I'm sure on Tzaras Abbas he paskin the surah.
Brings down one thing from among the Omer that's relevant, and then brings down all of his Torah.
But that's not what the Gemara is doing here. The Gemara is saying over a story about Rabbi Doisa, who's trying to prove a point that Tzaras Abbas is a surah, and he starts talking about other things. Yeah, it's not such a shverkeit to say that he's recounting what happened at that point. Yeah. So let's see Rashi. Yisraelim Hadorim be'eretz Ammon and Moav. The Yidden who live in the eretz Ammon and Moav, which is on the other side of the Yarden. Shekibish Moshe Misichai. These are the lands that Moshe Rabbeinu originally had captured from Sichai. V'niskachu b'kedushas Eretz Yisrael. And this is when we went into Eretz Yisrael the first time. But the Achshav b'Bayisheni Vatla Kedushasa, and therefore v'Zoyrin b'Shviyas. You're allowed to plant there on the Shemitah year. V'tiknu lahem Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Sheni b'Shviyas. They were misaken that there should be Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Ani. I'm sorry, I said it's Ma'aser Ani b'Shviyas. K'dim Mefarish l'kamon, like the Gemara is going to explain shortly. V'pnei Parnasas Aniyim sheba Eretz Yisrael. So the Aniyim in Yisrael will have Parnasa she'ein lahem Ma'alecha b'Shviyas. There's no lekha chikha upeya if there's nothing that's being planted or harvested properly, and therefore they can go to Eretz Ammon and Moav v'hoichlin sham v'noitim lekha chikha upeya ma'asrani. That's how they can get food. Umakabam gerim in akadavim. Well, Amrina, we don't say that mamzerim hein, the people of those lands are mamzerim because we b'nois Yisrael shabo aleim oivdekachavim. These are children of Yiddish girls that were violated by goyim. The ikar rabban, the past, they were rabbanim who held that the people in this city were technically Yidden, yet they were mamzerim, and therefore they would be ushered to come into Klal Yisrael. Okay, so now let's see what happened. So this is the meeting that they had with Rabbi Doisa ben Hyrcanus.
That's not the definition of a deraisa mamzer. That if somebody is raped or has a child from a goy,
that is a shaila. That's going to be the Gemara. That's a shaila. If Eved va'akum habal bas Yisrael, there's a machlokes I think Tanoim, if the Vlad is a mamzer or not.
Right? Couldn't you just have a concern that if they're not, if the descendants are going to be Jewish, they may over time marry or cohabitate with relatives that would create mamzerim because they're not going to be
That's a
machmir.
beautiful thought. That's what the Gemara is going to get into that, and that's one of the things the Gemara is going to bring up. It's almost like you're quoting word for word a Rashi that we're going to learn a little later. Zok Gemara, Vice Rosh is not your first time around, because that was very well
last cycle. I made it through this volume of the Art Scroll, so we're still good.
See, it's stuck. Zok the Gemara, Tana, we learned. Kishanichnasu, when they came into Rabdaisa, nichnasu b'Pesach. They all came in together. So everyone was asking before, they came in different times. When they went to Rabdaisa, they came in together. But kishayotzu b'shloisha psachim, they went out in 3 doors. Why would they go out in 3 doors? So let's see. Rashi says. Now Rashi doesn't say, but Tosfos does say.
Gemara says.
No, why? Why do they go out in 3 doors?
Gemara says. The Gemara's going to soon say why.
Well, let's see what the Gemara says. Let's see what Tosfos says. They didn't want to all encounter Rabbi Yosy at the same time, because if he sees like, oh, there's 3 people coming up against him, then he would pull out all his weapons and chop them down. And then if he overwhelms them with rayas, they'll have to give in, and they don't want it. That's one of the reasons was why they went out on 3 separate doors. They wanted to be discreet, like Yosef's brothers when they came to Mitzrayim. Inami yotu b'gimel psachim kedei sheyimtu or she'u v'yishmu tshuvasai. They wanted to make sure that, I guess, wherever they go, they'll bump into him. That they don't know where he'll be, so they spread out to make sure that they'll for sure be able to encounter him, because they needed to have this meeting. So Paga boy Rabbi Akiva, the first person who met Rabbi Yosy was Rabbi Akiva. Actually, he asked him kashas, and he answered them. Amalei, he told him. So this is Rabbi Yosy saying, Atahu Akiva, you're the famous Akiva. Sheshim chahaylech, misayf oilam, v'atzayfa, you are the famous Akiva of Gamzum l'toiva, as we heard earlier. Ashrecha, lucky are you. Shezachisa l'sham, you're zeicha to this. L'shem, is that what it means? We have in our scroll, is it l'shem or is it l'sham?
L'shem.
So you're zeicha to this name. V'adayin, but as great as you are, Rabbi Akiva, v'adayin lo higata l'royei baker. You're not even like a shepherd of cattle. So Amar Rabbi Akiva, in his great Anivos, he says, v'afilu l'royei tzoin, even to royei tzoin. Not only am I not as big as a royei baker, I'm not even a royei tzoin. So there's a shaila what this means. Royei baker or royei tzoin. So the Marsha has a nice shtickle. He was trying to say Royei Baker, the Nevi'im Harishonim were called Royei Baker. The Nevi'im Harishonim were called Royei Baker. You're bringing me a story from Chagai Hanavi, who was from the Nevi'im Achronim. So he said, the fact that you're quoting Chagai, because in the conversation they quoted that Chagai said that Taras Erva is Aser.
This is what they told the Yevamos.
Yeah. So this is what Rabbi Akiva told the religion. He quoted from Chagai Hanavi. He says, from Chagai Hanavi is not a raya. You know why? Because he's the Nevi'im Achronim, he's from the smaller Nevi'im. But you didn't bring me from the Nevi'im Harishonim, who is Royei Baker, who's compared to Royei Baker in the passage.
No, you complained that Rabbi Akiva, you told Rabbi Akiva that he was a Royei Baker.
Right, but the remez, like Gila Royei Baker, me, like Royei Baker, you didn't bring me a raya from the Nevi'im Harishonim, therefore I'm rejecting your raya. So Rabbi Akiva answered, you're right. I'm not quoting from the Nevi'im Harishonim. But where do you think mine Chagai got it from? He got it from Allah Moshe Sinai. So if I really right sign, Moshe Rabbeinu was a right sign. So you might say that you might say that you don't trust Chagai because he's not a Roy Booker. Well, guess what? I have a Roy sign on my side. So that's the one that the Pshat that Marsha says. What? No, but he said it comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Psak came from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Psak came from Moshe Rabbeinu.
I was 10 years old and I came to my father and I told him Rabbi Bornstein was more important than you.
Okay. Zok Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to analyze the other parts of the conversation. There were many lands that were conquered by the original Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, but were not conquered by the Oile Bavel. and therefore sure, these lands had a Kedusha Yisrael during the first base of Mikdash, but the second time around, they were not Kodesh. Therefore, why do they Bedavka not conquer them? And why did they Bedavka not annex them? Is Kadei Sheyismuchu Aleim Aniyim B'Shvius, so that the Aniyim will be able to rely on them for Shvius and get Parnosa from them. Okay, Umekabel Geir min Karduvim v'Tarmud. You're allowed to be Makabel Geir from these places. Frank Gemara, Eini, is that so? Vatani Rami by Yecheskel, Ein Makabel Geir min Karduvim. You're not allowed to be Makabel Geir from Karduvim. Amar Rav Ashi said, you're misquoting it. Rami by Yecheskel wasn't talking about Karduyim, he was talking about Kartuyim, not with a dal, but with a tough, and those are different places. So in Kartuyim there was a problem, but Karduyim there's no problem. Itmar, Kartuyim Itmar, it's Kartuyim. Kedamar Inchi, like everyone says, like the Vel says, that Kartuyim with the tough, Psulim they're possible. The Ikadamri, there's another way this went down. The Amri, the Ikadamri, Tani Rami by Yecheskel, Ein Mekabel Gerin in Kartuyim. You cannot accept game from Kartuyim. My love, Hainu Kartuyim, Hainu Kartuyim. So they quoted Rabbi Yecheskel right, that it was Kartuyim. But they assumed that there shouldn't be a difference. Kartuyim and Kartuyim in the same place. It's just pronounced differently. Amar Vashi, Loi, Kartuyeh Lechud, Kartuyeh Lechud. There are two different peoples. One is mutter to marry from, and one you could be Makabel Geber, one you can't. Kedamar Inchi, Kartuyeh Psili. It's the Kartuyeh that are possible. Rabbi Yochanan v'Savi, Rabbi Yochanan, and there was another Chacham Barim of Savi, the Amri Tarvayu, they both said that Ein Mekabel Gerin Minar Tarmudim. So they disagreed with what we quoted earlier, and they held that you were not allowed to be Mekabel Gerim from the Talmud. Did Rabbi Yochanan say that you cannot be Mekabel? No, Talmudim is one of the two that were undisputed before, right? Right. That was one of the people that was discussed. Rabbi Yochanan said over from Chagai Hanavi was that Mekabel Gerim min Akaduyim min Talmudim. So there was a discussion about what the Keduyim are, but no one discusses the Talmudim. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "And ain't Mekabel Gerim min Talmudim." And the Mepharshim asks, "Can he argue on a Navi?" So the Torah says the Rishonim said that Rabbi Yochanan disputed that the Navi said this. In fact, tomorrow, did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that ain't Mekabel Gerim min Talmudim? But Tanan, we learned a brayso. Kol haksamim haboy min harekem tahir. And Rashi tells us that ksamim are stained clothing, which means it could be a problem of nida. So let's see what Rashi says. Ein Mekabel Gerim. Why wouldn't you be Mekabel Gerim? Mefarish lekabon shemam zerim hein mi Yisrael shenit musham. We will say we're afraid that these aren't goyim. There's actually Yidden that became mamzerim, like Avigdor suggested earlier. Haksamim is shenimtzu begadim abam merekem. So if begadim come from rekem and there's a stain on them, we don't assume it's from a paper cut. We assume it's tumas nida tahirim. But if they come from rekem, they're tar. The goyta does not have tumas nida. It's only a Jewish woman. So therefore, from goyish lands, they didn't say that a beggar that comes with a stain will be tummy. So we have over here a dispute about it. So what happened was Rabbi Yehuda Matame. Rabbi Yehuda argues why Mipnei Shem Gerim V'Toyin. Rabbi Yehuda holds those who come from Rekem are not going their Yidden because they're Gerim and therefore V'Tama Matame. And why can't we? And why can't we take? What's the problem with taking their begadim? V'Toyin. The problem is they went after derech. Shemiru Dosam. They were Gerim who went after derech. And therefore, the Gazru al Kismayan. So therefore, the Ksamim do have a tumah. You know why? Sha'af al pi shachatu shemiru Yisraelimim. The problem is becoming Jewish is a one-way street. You can never go back. So therefore, even though they change their mind, it doesn't matter. They still have it in tumah. Okay. So let's see what the Gemara says weiter. But mibein ha'odik echavim. Look, Rabbi Yehuda, if you have any Ksam that comes amongst the Goyim, so we know they're Goyish cities, then they'll be Tahir. Now, if you notice, the Mishnah makes a very broad statement. From all of the Goyish lands, you can assume that there's no Jews there. It's all Goyim, and therefore any stained begodim will not have it in tumah. Va'abinaba. And the Gemara asks right on that Mishnah, you're making such a broad statement from any goyish land. There's no din tumah. Kapasuk v'tani. It's so simple and straightforward. Mibein oivit gechavim. Any goyish land, there's no tumas ksamim. Va'afilim in Talmud, even from Talmud, which means that Talmud is for sure not a yid. Amalav b'savik yishol kaimid. So the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said, Zoy Meres, from this Mishnah we can prove that Mekablim Gerin the Talmud. So on Amar Aleph, Rabbi Yochanan said, you cannot be Mekablim Gerin from Talmud. We're afraid that the Mamzerim. But over here, we have Rabbi Yochanan quoting from this Mishnah that we can assume there's no Yidden in Talmud, and therefore you could be Mekablim Gerin from them. And if you're going to tell me, Zois V'loi Svirle, and if you're going to tell me that even though Rabbi Yochanan said Zois Meres from this Mishnah, you see, you could be Mekabel Gerim, he's just saying you have a right from this Mishnah, but I don't hold it. I hold like a different Tana. You cannot say that because for Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we have a general rule from Rabbi Yochanan that halacha is ta Mishnah. Whenever a Mishnah says something that's undisputed, we pass it like it. So in fact, we have Rabbi Yochanan who says that you're not allowed to take Gerim from Talmud, but we have this ta Mishnah that says you are allowed to take Gerim from Talmud. So it's a contradiction within Rabbi Yochanan himself. So no, it's actually a machlokes what Rabbi Yochanan said. Either Rabbi Yochanan said halacha k'stam mishnah, or if you follow that Rabbi Yochanan said that you cannot take gerim from Talmud, then you're going to have to say that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold halacha k'stam mishnah. Okay. Toysus has another pshat. Inami savar min ha'ovdik achavim taharim levad mitarim. He's just touching up the Mishnah differently, and they'll say that the Mishnah is not making such a broad statement. There are exceptions to that. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Lamaisa, why not? Me Talmud, my time alone. What is the problem with taking gerim from Talmud? What could go wrong? Zok the Gemara pligi bar Rabbi Yochanan v'savi. Although they both said that you're not allowed to take gerim, there was a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and his savi friend. Chad Omar. One said Mishum Avdei Shloimei, because of the avodim of Shloimei. And Rashi tells us, what does this mean? Avdei Shloimei, the third line in Rashi, Shanosu b'nois Yisrael machmas oishran. The Jewish girls wanted to marry these, the Jewish girls wanted to marry these servants of Shloimeh because they were high on the social totem pole. They were wealthy. So these Jewish girls married Goyim because they wanted to live a rich life. The Darin Sham, the Cheskes Oivdik Achavim, and they lived amongst the Goyim as if they were Goyim, they acted as Goyim. And this is the line that I wanted David Dalton to see. He says, the Kesaver Oivdik Achavim, the Evet, Haba al Bas Yisrael, Havlad Mamzer. So it's Rabbi Yochanan or Savi. They hold a Goy or an Evet, who's Baal Bas Yisrael, Havlad Mamzer. And these were Avodim, these were Goyim.
But this is the Rabbanan Dika Mamzer.
I'm not sure. I don't know that sugya.
Isn't that local?
That what?
That a woman who marries a goy, the blood is the mom?
I don't know if we pass one like that. Rabbi Yochanan said that.
No, we got all kinds of people like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Here I have a wall.
The Chad Amar, and the other one said, Mishum b'nois Yisrael. Because Mishum b'nois Yerushalayim, because of the b'nois Yerushalayim. And the Gemara is going to explain that there was a mass rapes going on. Bishlama l'man da'amar Mishum avdei shloimei. Bishlama, if you hold that it's because of avdei shloimei. Kasavar, you could say he holds. Evet gechavim ve'evet haba bas Yisrael avlad mamzer. There's a chash of mamzers. However, Ela l'man da'amar Mishum b'nois Yerushalayim. What's the story that happened over there? So it's a tragic story. So Kamar Pligi bar Rabbi Yosef or Rabbanan v'tarvayu mishmei de Rabbi Bar Chana. They had a machlokes as to what Rabbi Bar Chana said. Chad Omer one says that when they came to attack Yerushalayim, Tracer Alfi Gavre, there were 12,000 people in the army, and in addition to that, the Shita Alfi Kashtuye, there was another 6,000 archers. The Chad Omer and the other nusach was that Tracer Alpha Gavre, there was only a total of 12,000 soldiers, Uminayu Shita Alpha Kastuye. But half of them were archers. So there was either 12,000 people who came in, who attacked Yerushalayim, or maybe 18,000. When the Goyim came into the Heichal, Hakoil Nifnu, what did everyone run to grab, to steal, to pillage? Al Kesef Azov. The Haim Nifnu, but what did these people do? Who did these people go for? Nifnu al Banois Yerushalayim. They came and they forgot about the money. They just attacked the women of Yerushalayim. Shenemar, like it says in Eichel, Noshim b'tzion inu. In Tzion, they tortured women. The Sulais b'ar Yehuda. So all of these women were carrying children from their rapists. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani. Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani said, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Pasuk Zeh, who said this pasuk? Noshim b'tzion inu. The Sulais b'ar Yehuda. Who said this? Sar ha'olam. Sar ha'olam said it. Who is Sar ha'olam? Rashi is the name of a malach. A malach said, I guess it's a very powerful malach. He said this. I'm sorry? Correct. That's the whole problem. If there weren't Jews, we wouldn't have to worry. Then you could be Makabal Geir. The problem is because they're Jews. Then they would be kosher. They would be kosher. They could be Magair, and then they become regular Jews. Because they might be Mamzerim. We don't accept them as Gerim because they might be already Jewish and be Mamzerim. If we know they're Goyim, sometimes it's better to be Mtadach Beger than with someone who you don't know about their yichus. Because a Ger, no matter what they did in the past, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
What's the other side on your problem that ended up all
That's not a Mamzer. The child's not a Mamzer. Child's kosher.
Kosher, but
Yeah. Well, we're going to soon see that. Right now, we have an assumption that if the mother's Jewish, the child's Jewish. Rashi actually has a very mechudesh kashita here that sometimes if the father's Jewish, the child's Jewish as well. No, we follow normally that the mother is what controls the religion.
I read that when people want to adopt children, they're encouraged to adopt goyim.
Yeah. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Amru, Shalosh Ha'olam Amru. Now we go to a different pasuk, and the question is why the Gemara is introducing this pasuk. There are some shittas hold because this pasuk is what we started with. There are certain people, because we had the pasuk on Amar Aleph, now Yosy comes Akanti. There are those who say that this should be before the last thing we just learned, because that leads into it. Nara Yosy comes Akanti. Who said it? Man Amri. Who said this? It's in Tehillim. Elam Mekudesh Barichu. If it's the Rebbeinu Shem who said it, that cannot be. Meek is it Nekamei. Gam Zakanti. The Rebbeinu Shem can't use the word Gam Zakanti. The El David Amri. Elamai David said it. Me cautious kula high. David lived till 70. He was playing a manchik. So how could he say the word zakanti? Allah Shema Mina Sar Ha'olam Amr. The Malach Sar Ha'olam said it, which teaches us a chiddush that Malachim do age. The Rebbeinu doesn't age. But vice the choice Malachim age. But Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani. Amar Rabbi Yonasan Ma'idich Siv. It says in the Eicha Yodoi Paras Sar Al Kol Machmadel. The Ish Sar B'Oyev Haman Harazeh. The enemy put his hand on all of our precious items. And we'll soon see Machmadeh is referring to the Torah. Ze'amon and Moav. Why? Because Ammon and Moav had a chip on their shoulder against the Torah. You know why Ammon and Moav had a chip on their shoulder against the Torah? Because the Torah says, so they were upset at the Torah. Everybody went to pillage the gold and silver. The Haim Nifnu al Sefer Torah. You know why? Amru said, Jesh a kosev boy. So they burnt the Sefer Torah. So that's what it means. Yodei Parish. Sorry, I'll call Machmadeh. Rashi says Machmadeh is referring to the Torah. There was a Torah in the Aruch Kodesh. What do you mean? Yeah.
The Torah in the Aruch Kodesh. Oh, this is by Rishon.
Yeah. Yisar Peish. Tziva Hashem el Yaakov. Hashem commanded to Yaakov. Sviv of Tzorah. Its enemies were around it, torturing it, bothering it. Amarav. So maybe there were other Sefer Torah. Maybe there were other Sefer Torah there. Amarav. Rav said, "Kagoyin Humanya lefum Nahara." Humanya was a port city that was surrounded and attacked by the Goyim. Similar to one of the cities that are being attacked today in the Ukraine. It's a port city. I don't remember which one it was. Okay. Humanya lefum Nahara. Humanya Yevanim Haim. There's Yevanim there. Umetzim levnei Pum Nahara. So Humanya was, I guess, near the city of Pum Nahara, which had Yidden, Shem Yisrael Anim. So there were poor Yidden who lived in Pum Nahara. and the goyim from Romania would attack them and torture them and shoot missiles. Amar Yehuda, Amar Abasi, Ovid Kechavim, a goy, Shekidesh, Bisman Hazeh, as with Ovid Kechavim does kedushin. So a goy comes over to a girl and says, to a Jewish girl, and says, Arayat nu Kadesh li, the Basu Kadesh Moshe Yisrael. So normally, because he's a goy, there's no kedushin, we can ignore it. Rabbi Asi, no, we have to be concerned. Choshin lekadushin. Maybe this person is Jewish. We just don't know that they're Jewish. Why? Because Shema me'aseres hashvatimu. We know that we lost 10 shvatim, they went missing. Maybe this person is one of them. Frankly, Marva called the parish Mura parish. If he comes out of his place and he comes to be Mekadesh, a Jew, a squirrel in our place, well, he's parish. You go Basarai. So we can assume he's a guy. We're talking about if you went to where we know that there's a Aseres HaShvatim. We know that they were there. And therefore, since we know this was their place, what? Where do we know that these Aseres HaShvatim settled? The Navi tells us where they settled. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Kana, v'yanchem bechelach v'chibar nehargoizen v'arimadai. And we dash in chalach is chalazoin, chibur zu charyav zu chadayav nehargoizen zu ginzik v'arimadai zu chemdon v'chavrisel. For Amillah, there are those who say zu nihar v'chavrisel. Chavrisel man, what are the environs of this neighborhood? Amar Shmuel krach mushchi chidki v'dumkaya. And we'll stop here. We'll be mamshech tomorrow. So since these were areas where the Aseres HaShvatim settled, even though now everyone looks like Goyim, yeah, if someone's Mekadesh, a woman from in that place, we have to be concerned that they might be Jewish, and therefore she will need again. Okay, we'll stop here.
Every city.
Each one of these cities has a Chabad house. Oh, very good. Akiva is like each one of these cities had a Chabad house. Rabbi Yochanan b'chul nifsal. Well, that's just the beginning. Okay, it's okay, yeah. Okay, but that's a whole sugya because this is the Rashi that says that if the father is Jewish, the child can be Jewish. There's a shtickle sugya, so we'll tackle that tomorrow. So if she Rashi Ruva Mamzerim Shenitmu Aseres Hashvatim Ba'oivdois Koichavim, men married girls who were goyim, which according to us the children are goyim, not Mamzerim. Uveneim harein to Yisraelim. Rashi says that their children are like Yisraelim, but noyig but Isur Mamzeres. So this is a very big sugya because it's a big chiddush that Rashi says this, and we can have to understand why Rashi had to say that. So we'll tackle that tomorrow.
According to Rashi, there's no 10 lost tribes.